Hey y'all, it's me again. Hi. I've had a good weekend, good church service, etc. I actually want to talk about something that was talked about a lot in my sermon this morning, because it really hit me. Because like my last video when I talked about that verse from Timothy, and like how it really struck me how a lot of like almost token or like pocket verses that we throw out all the time, we don't actually sit on and reflect on their true meaning. And like I had another situation like that during church today. My church has been doing a like series through the book of Mark, through the Gospel of Mark. And it's been really good. But we were on Mark 4, which is the whole parable of the sower in Mark. And so, good stuff. But, the parable of the sower is one of those stories that anyone who's been in the church knows. It's one of those stories that you kind of just reference. You barely ever take the time to go through it and read it once you have been in faith for a while. Which I really think, after this sermon and after this past week, I really think that that's like a bad thing for us, that we just kind of stop caring about, because we're like, oh, we know that story. Like, why do I need to read the story of Noah and the ark? Because I know that story from when I was 5. Why do I need to know the story of Joseph when I knew that story when I was like 5? Like I learned that in Sunday school. I don't need to read that again. I read Joseph at the beginning of this year, and my mind got blown. Because I was like, you know what, I know the story, but let me read it deeply again just in case. And that was a great idea. But, same thing with this in Mark. It's a good story, and it's a really good one to digest. And we often just neglect to give it the attention that it deserves because we feel we're kind of above it because we got it. Like, we have a very surface level understanding of the story, and so we just kind of ignore it any time that we're supposed to read it. Like, okay, it's the story about the farmer, and he throws out a bunch of seeds, and some of it gets eaten by birds, and then some of it gets scorched by the sun, and then some of it gets swallowed by weeds, and then some of it grows, and it's great, yay, we want to be the plants that grow, yay! And like, that's the whole thing. But like, there's more to it. I'm not gonna go through the whole thing because, that would be forever. And I'm not just gonna repeat my pastor's sermon. But the bit that I do want to highlight was something that really stuck out to me, because it was something that like I had not heard before, and it really made me think. And it was, the bit about the weeds and the thorns. Like, often we think about it as like, okay, like when you have dandelions out or whatever, and then you try to freaking plant a real plant in the middle, and also you see the dandelions kind of just tower over your real plant and just make it so it doesn't get sun and it dies. And like, that's legit. That is often like what it is, because, like the weeds and all of that, the thorns and the weeds and the thistles are supposed to be like the worries of the world crashing down on you, and you forget to look to God, and so you get smushed and suffocated by it. Like, you understand the gospel, like you're starting to get it, but then when things start to get tough, you give up. But the important thing that my pastor brought up that is very true is that plants grow up, but they also grow down. So while you're trying to grow down, so are those weeds. So are the roots of the weeds in your life. And the weeds, are like the issues with the world, the way the world views you, the things that are important in society versus important with God. And it's whose roots are deeper. That's the real question, is whose roots are deeper. Is it the seed of evil, or is it the seed of life? Do you let the dandelions and like the, like the poison ivy, do you let that have deeper roots than like the acorn? That's God. And like, that is the true question. And when I realized that, like that revelation during church was like, bam, that was great. And it just made me think a lot about, once again, looking at verses that I just kind of neglect to take deeply because I just assume that I get them. Like, there's a reason some of the most said Bible verses are the most said Bible verses. It's because they're good. Like, I was chatting with my friend after church on the way home, and like, John 3:16 is a great verse, but I can't remember the last time I felt moved by it or let myself sit and meditate on it. Because I'm just like, oh, it's John 3:16, oh, he so loved the world. Like, there's so much more to it, and yet we ignore it. And like I said in the last video with that verse from 1 Timothy, like, he gave us not a spirit of fear. Like, that's so big. And yet we just kind of like, whatever, I got it. But no, there's always more. Like, you don't have to be like some fancy person who somehow like quotes like Nahum and Malachi all the time in order to be a deep Christian. You just have to actually understand the verses that are being presented to you and understand them fully. Like, another devotion I was reading this week was talking about Joan of Arc, and it was like, Joan of Arc, she was illiterate. She was a farmhand's daughter. Women were treated like garbage in that time. They had no rights, especially not like a farmhand's daughter. She was basically just a pair of hands and a uterus. Like, and she was illiterate and she was a farmhand, and yet she led the army because God told her to and she trusted him. I doubt that she could quote Nahum to you. And yet her faith was stronger than all of ours, let's be real. Do you think that you would be willing to lead the entire, like, U.S. Army right now? And just trust God? Like, I couldn't. And yet she was willing. And, like, that's faith. And that's faith that doesn't, like, that's the heart of it. It's not how many verses, like, how obscure Bible knowledge you have. I mean, yes, absorb the word, swallow the word. But, like, it's not how, like, intricate, how much you memorize everything in the Bible. It's how much you actually have taken it in. And people who can recite the whole Bible from beginning to end will often have less faith in the person who knows just their 5 verses real good. And, like, that's just super important. Like, something we talked about a lot in church this morning was how deep is your faith? How deep is your faith? It doesn't matter how wide of an area. It doesn't matter, like, how many verses you have memorized or, like, any of that. It's how deep is it? Even if you only get, like, one thing in deep, that's one thing that's in much deeper than most people will ever get in their life. The parable of the sower talks about 4 different types of seed, and only 1/4 of them went deep. 3/4 of them died. That's 3/4 of the people. If you can be part of that 1/4 that can get at least something deep, that's better than 3/4 of the people around you. Like, 3/4 of the people will never be able to understand a deep relationship with God. Not because they don't want to. They think that they do. Once again, I was chatting with my friend after church about this. Like, they think that they have the deep relationship. And then they get hit with something, and then it's sink or float time. And oftentimes they'll sink. Because, some of it is American Christianity, and it's complete other propensity for being the most shallow thing on earth. The prosperity gospel and all that stuff. The second any of those people get hit with real hardship, they're going to have to, sink or swim. And it's going to be tough for them. But, hopefully it'll be a wake-up call rather than a complete and utter sinking. But yeah, it's that. Like, you don't have to do that all. Just, yeah. That was definitely different than what I was imagining I was going to say, so that's why I'm a little at a loss for words, but that was a great rant I went on. But yeah, okay, God, that's what you wanted. But yeah, just what's more important is that you take what is presented to you and go as deep as you can with it, rather than trying to build up this persona of being someone who is super deep and super spiritual. Because God sees who you really are, and when rubber hits the road, your fake tire is going to fly right off. Unless that's actual spirituality. And if so, you're not going to try to make a persona, you're not going to try and look cool by quoting obscure Bible verses all the time to prove your point. You're just going to, you're going to be yourself. Yeah. Yeah. Once again, that was just off the top of my head. Okay. Well, I'm going to close this off in prayer. Okay. Okay. God, thank you so much once again for the opportunity for this, for me to do this and for people to watch that need to watch and all that good stuff, Lord. Please, Lord, put everything that, you shared with me to share with these people on all of our hearts, God. Remind us to not take any of your word for granted. All of your word is good. All of it. Even the things that we glaze over, God, that is good. And that is there for a reason and is there for our edification and our growth and our ability to be who it is that you need for us to be, Lord. So continue to open our eyes and our ears and our hearts and everything, God, so that we don't take any of you for granted, Lord, that we understand that everything that you have given us in your word and in our lives is a gift, Lord. Even if, we don't understand that right this second, Lord. Help us to see it as a gift. Lord, help us to go deeper with our faith. Help us to go deeper and go seeking for depth rather than surface area, God. Lord, I know I personally pray that I can understand a single verse deeply and fully and with all of who I am as a person, rather than being able to just read further, God. And I just thank you for everything that you've done for me and all the wisdom you've imparted from me from my personal studies with you, God. And Lord, I just pray that you help us all, and you help us all to be seeking you and your wisdom and your relationship, and just to remember the gospel and to turn everything back to the gospel, Lord. Just to what the good news really is, no matter what is going on, that you turn us back to the good news, Lord. In all actions, in all deeds, in all fights, in all oppression, in all acts of hatred towards us, in all acts of love towards us, help us and remind us to turn back to your gospel, so that all we may do may be filtered through you, Lord. And Lord, just thank you. You're so good. Pray that you may build our faith and help us dive deeper within you, God. In your name, amen. Have a good one, y'all. See you later.